I think environmental justice is a key issue for both this generation and future generations of Australians. There's no doubt that our state governments and also our federal government has been captured by the multinational corporations in particularly the coal mining and oil and gas industries. Our regulations are seriously bent in favour of those major multinational companies to the detriment of the environment and the communities on the ground. So our land and our water and our future is being compromised because of short-term thinking by politicians and bureaucrats who are really knee-jerking to the needs of these industries. We need to do something about it. We need to do something now. And I think the only way is to put serious pressure on our governments to change the legislation. And we need to use some unusual ultra-legal or extra-legal tactics like non-violent direct action to force the governments to change their tune, because at the moment they're sitting on the barbed wire fence.
Thanks very much, Linda. My speech could be recalled from semi-retirement to accidental environmental activism, or how do we achieve social change and environmental justice when all the cards are stacked against us? Because I think that's the reality of it at the moment, but I think there's a positive story in all of this, and I'm absolutely convinced we can win this battle. Just a bit of background. Yes, I used to build offshore oil platforms. I actually went overseas when I left university in 1974 and started building platforms in Southeast Asia. I then went to the North Sea in the early days of the North Sea and put in platforms out in the Norwegian sector and the British sector of the North Sea when it was all pretty rough and ready. Then to the United States, Gulf of Mexico, Brazil, and then I was put in some tenders over in the northwest shelf of Australia, and we also built some underwater robotic vehicles which still climb up and down North Rankin for Woodside. So I'd have to say I'm a bit of a fan of offshore oil development as distinct from what we see here with things like coal seam gas or on land coal development, which are highly destructive. And some people might say, well, you're having a bet both ways. But I think there are some real disciplines in the offshore world that are not necessarily reflected in things like Deepwater Horizon blowout in the Gulf. And I have been on blowouts. I've been on oil platforms that have burnt down and things. But we're not seeing the same disciplines on land in some of these new industries. Now, just quickly, there's a lot to cover in 15 minutes. I was dragged into this, if you like, 3 years ago when we discovered that a South Korean consortium led by a junior miner called Cockatoo Coal in Australia had purchased 5 coal assets from Anglo Coal. Now, I also happen to know the investment bankers on the Anglo Coal side of the deal, and I understood that Anglo were delighted to sell these assets because they were underperforming coal licences or sleepers or ones they thought they couldn't develop. The only shock was one was sitting right under my farm in Sutton Forest. So, you know, the first reaction was complete NIMBYism. Oh my God, they want to build a longwall coal mine under us, they're going to destroy the neighbourhood. We whizzed over and talked to Prue Goward, who's our local member, and had a chat, and we said, we've got to alert people. Did you know about it? She didn't even know. So we held a public meeting 4 days later, 3 days before the last federal election, and we got 400 people in the rain, and that began my journey as an activist. And we set up, on that night, we set up the Southern Highlands Coal Action Group. The Action Group now has over 5,000 signed up supporters. We run it like a business. We have a company, we have a Southern Highlands Preservation Fund, a fundraising vehicle. There's only 2 directors of the company, myself and one other, so we're the guys that'll catch it in the neck if we make a legal mistake. But we have a group of ex-business people, experienced industry professionals from the oil and gas industry, the coal industry. We also have local people who don't have any business background or any wealth or anything. We have ex-car mechanics and so on working in our team, and we're divided up into a marketing and sales group who go to markets every weekend. We've got technical specialists who formulate submissions. we've got some legal people and so on. So we run it just like a business. But let's get back a bit to the Southern Highlands. As you know, it's a tourism area, it's a sort of retirement area. There are boutique agricultural activities, there's horse breeding, there's cattle studs, there's truffle businesses, there's vineyards, a lot of retired people, and many towns and villages, 40,000 people in the Southern Highlands. We're part of the Sydney catchment. And there's some unique geology, particularly in the area where we are. We have an underground aquifer, one of the most productive in New South Wales, I have subsequently discovered, sitting right above the coal seam. So when POSCO, who are our protagonist, the South Korean steel company, announced they were going to longwall mine this area, no ifs and no buts, there were no questions in their mind that was going to happen. They were going to start mining in 2016 and extracting a couple of million tonnes of coal a year. I had a meeting with the chief executive of POSCO and said, well, there's no way you're going to achieve those objectives. You're actually not going to get this mine off the ground for a whole lot of fundamental reasons. So that started our relationship with POSCO off on a good footing. In addition to the South Koreans wanting to mine under Sutton Forest, which, to give you an idea, is the mining licence area was 115 square kilometres. We then discovered that a two-bit company called Leichhardt Resources had been given a 3,170 square kilometre coal seam gas lease across half of the Southern Highlands, right down into the Shoalhaven. And when I say two-bit, I mean two-bit. This was issued by McDonald to a one-man band in a Sydney law office, a guy called Simon Tolhurst, who had no experience, no expertise, no money, and no reason to be given that licence, and the two others he was awarded by the minister at the time, which, by the way, have since been renewed by the coalition government, and that's another story. To add spice to this story, we also had Berrima Colliery down the road, smallest coal mine in New South Wales, providing coal to the Berrima cement plant. And that is another element that we got involved in. So I suppose we went from not really knowing anything about this to over our heads in fighting coal and coal seam gas. Now, in about 15 minutes, I'm going to hear the result of a court case. That's the judgment's coming down in the Land and Environment Court on a court case resulting from these activities. And we've run a couple of different court cases. Now, our strategy, I was talking to Rosemary last night and saying our strategy is essentially asymmetric warfare. The principles are we have no money and we have very limited money. We have no power. We've got to use limited money and limited power fighting against some of the most powerful, well-funded, well-lobbied industries in the world, in coal mining and oil and gas. That's a daunting task. So I hate to say it, you've got to think like your Ho Chi Minh up against the US Army with all their weapons and many hundreds of billions to spend on trying to obliterate you. And so you must think tactically and strategically and tactically in this war. And I think one of the lessons we've learned, and observing other community groups, is they use a lot of emotion, but they don't necessarily have the strategic and tactical thinking to mobilise their forces, use them in bite-sized chunks, and target the weaknesses of the enemy. So the objective is throw hand grenades into the tank tracks, put sand into the gearbox, slow them down, obfuscate, obstruct using whatever mechanism you can. Now, getting back to the issues on the ground, I'm going to run through these very quickly because I could spend, an hour, 2 hours talking about this. The legal case that's in the Land and Environment Court at the moment came about because Hume Coal, which is the joint venture between POSCO and Cockatoo Coal in Sutton Forest, took one of my neighbours to court to gain access to a private road that linked the main road, Golden Vale Road, to a property that they had managed to sign an access agreement with one of the landowners. Now, in our area, all the landowners, by and large, have said, we don't want the coal company on our land. We've mobilised total resistance, but there are 3 or 4 people who've said, we'll allow you on. The landowner said, no, we've blockaded the road, privately owned, for 7 months. So there's been a blockade in Carter's Lane for 7 months, and it's little old knitting nannies. It's people drinking. Sometimes we get there and we have glasses of wine. It's sort of a bit of a party atmosphere, but it's been going on, went on 24/7 for the first 2 months, and since then we run at 7 a.m. to sort of 5:36 p.m. in the evening, and we have a chicane set up so no trucks can get up the road. The protagonist took the landowner to court and said, we're going to force access onto this property via your road. There was a slight complexity across all the properties in this district, including my own. There's a covenant that was put in place by one of the landowners who had originally sold the properties that said there can't be any commercial activity on these properties except for agricultural activities. Now, the legal experts know better than I that covenants are quite a questionable device. And the issue was, does the covenant overweigh the Mining Act? Does the miner actually have right of way up this road? And they attempted to get an interlocutory injunction in November. We fortunately knocked them off in the court. The judge said, well, if I give you that, you're going to get on and do your drilling. It'll all be done. And we haven't heard the case. So we went back in February, and we're waiting now for this morning. Justice Sheehan in the Land and Environment Court is passing down his judgment. It's going to be interesting because it's precedent setting and he's taken quite a long time. So we're hoping we get a win. So if I start jumping up and down, you'll understand why. That's the Hume coal issue. There's a lot more happening there. We've got 9 landowners who've had access demands from the company. They've had Section 142 notices. If any of you are aware of the Mining Act, there's a whole process of a series of notices. The company's been rolling through the notices without any consideration for the practical, logic embedded in the Mining Act, which means landowners are supposed to be able, even though they're effectively forced to give access technically under the law, there's supposed to be a process of discussion and the evolution of an access agreement through discussion and followed by potential arbitration and so on. And we've found our company has just used the law in a very narrow legal way to issue a notice, wait 28 days, issue the next, wait 28 days, and not give landowners any ability to really negotiate. So we've mobilised a little counter-attack, and we're coordinating all 9 landowners, and we're hitting this coal company with everything it's worth. Every detail in the Mining Act we're asking them to respond to. We're treating every access agreement separately. So we're mobilising what you call a coordinated legal assault without using a lot of money on their position. Now, this ultimately may result in illegal, non-violent blockades of these properties, but that's down the track. So that's all underway, and that is a very interesting situation, and it points up a lot of holes in the legislation. We've also won a case against Boral for the expansion of the Berrima Colliery. They wanted to expand a very small coal mine, double production. This coal mine wasn't licensed, and they were advised in 2005 they had to license it. They put in an application under Part 3A in 2012. They failed to provide a thoroughly researched environmental impact statement. Planning assessment, or planning department gave it the tick, planning assessment committee gave it the tick. We looked at it and said, there's no way. They've trashed the aquifer, they're throwing polluted metal into the Wingecarribee River, we're going to take them to court. And we did, and the court, the Land Environment Court, supported our case and has not licensed the mine. So Boral is presently appealing on a judicial review at the moment. We'll see where that goes. But look, I could go on and on about using the law and using elements of the law and other tactics to hold these people off. But in conclusion, what's our objective? Our objective is not to shut down coal mining in Australia or even shut down all business activity in the Southern Highlands. It's actually to force the government to tighten the regulations. Clearly, I don't want to be mined under my property, and we don't want coal seam gas in our area, but I'm now involved with Drew Hutton behind the scenes very broadly in the Lock the Gate movement, and we spend a lot of time travelling to other communities, helping them think about how they fight this huge, what appears like the aliens coming over the hill. I believe, very simply, there's strength in numbers. We're trying to mobilise all the communities in New South Wales, all the communities in Queensland, and get together and fight this war as a joint exercise. And the weapons of the internet, social media, and so on help us. They're the asymmetric tools, if you like, that are helping us get there. The government, where do they sit? In New South Wales, they're straddling the barbed wire fence. They've put in place some policies that are half good, but have got serious holes. They don't seem to want to go the whole way on anything they do, whether it's strategic land use, aquifer interference, agricultural impact statements, or whatever. They get halfway, they stall out, and they put an out for the miner. No one trusts them. And we've tried to explain this to the government. If you keep going this way, it's all-out war on the ground. No one trusts you because your actions don't reflect your rhetoric, both pre and post-election. So there is a lot happening. I think we will win because I think communities are a lot smarter than politicians and bureaucrats. And by the way, you know, when we all work together, we can knock them over. And I mean with a combination of smart thinking, education, and in some cases it might have to be things that you should close your ears. You don't want to hear illegal activity on the ground. So thank you very much.